level 1 easy mode, if you're like, dude, I'm too stressed out, I can't even count anything. If you want to just start tracking, just take a photo of your food.
Mhm.
Just take a photo and create like a compilation of photos over the course of 3 weeks. That's just going to be level 1. Yeah.
So tracking alone can and has been shown to help people make behavior changes because they're just conscious and aware. A lot of people didn't know that they were having a little bit of extra here, a little bit of extra there, but when you're having to take a picture of it or log it and write it down, now all of a sudden it comes to the forefront like, oh, okay, this explains a lot.
What I've had the most simplest, and this has worked hundreds of times, especially in my beginning part of my journey where I didn't know a lot about meal composition just yet. I was like, let's just take out 20%. Let's go see what happens. Right? And they're like, okay, cool. And then they would take out 20%, and lo and behold, they would start to lose a bunch of weight. If I had one action plan that you guys can actually just do today, is to just track whatever you're doing for 3 weeks. And then on the check mark, did I gain weight? Did I maintain weight? Or did I lose weight? And then celebrate that. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if you gain weight, celebrate it, because you know what you're doing right now is not working. What?
So the first one was simply to look at the plate and cut that down by 20%. The second one was to be looking at the composition and start to change that around to follow plate method portioning. And then the third one is actually...
Have you ever followed a nutrition plan that was so difficult to follow that one, you either tried to follow it and then just completely quit, or two, you were successful, but only to find that you gained all the weight back because it was just very, very unsustainable for you? Today, I have my wife with me. She's the registered dietitian. I'm the trainer. We are going to go over 3 simple nutrition strategies that you can follow that's going to allow you to lose the weight.
Hi.
That was my 19,000th attempt. But let's do this. I'm really excited about this because there are so many nutrition plans out there. And while a lot of them do work, it's very difficult to sustain.
Right.
Oftentimes, like for me, when a client comes in, they're already frustrated. They're like, I don't want to follow this. I don't want to do this. And that's like the biggest thing when I get a client. What are some of the things
Yeah.
that clients ask you for?
Yeah, I get the same thing where people have already been frustrated. They've been trying things that are too difficult. That's not individualized at all for them. And so by the time that they're seeing me, they're just saying, is there any other way? Is there just a simple thing? So yeah, I'm excited because I think that we actually share a lot of commonalities on how we approach just simplifying and making it and understanding that we can still see results. And so let's start with kind of you talking through what is the first way that you would first work with someone and say.
So there's a ton of ways.
Okay.
And one, I want to divide them into like 3 categories,
Okay.
and they're all simple, right? Simple first, ninja later, but for the most part, we're not even going to get to ninja.
Yeah.
I think these are all just going to be fairly simple. But before we start to follow these plans, it's important and critical to first do the first step, which is just to track.
Yeah.
And there are multitude of ways to track. So level 1 easy mode, if you're like, dude, I'm too stressed out, I can't even count anything. If you want to just start tracking, just take a photo of your food. Just take a photo and create like a compilation of photos over the course of 3 weeks. That's just going to be level 1. Level 2 is actually tracking it via plate method, which is essentially what we both teach, right? It's the composition of the food. It's a palm size of protein, a fist size of carbohydrates, and then a handful of vegetables, right? That's the plate composition. You can track in that method as well. And then the final way to track is the caloric way to track, which is using an app called Lose It or MyFitnessPal. and just tracking every single thing. I remember in the past it was like impossible to track every single thing, but now you can literally just scan things and then it's going to give you a very accurate representation of what you're eating. So it's much easier now. So the first step before following a weight loss type of nutrition plan is to first track what you're doing for the first 3 weeks.
Right.
So when I tell a client this, I normally tell them, I was like, let's just track what you're doing now. And then after 3 weeks, we're going to either check one of these boxes. Did I gain weight? Did I lose weight? Or did I maintain weight? All those 3 answers are really, really important for me. And it's also very important for them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when they start to follow it, they get frustrated because they either maintained the weight or gained the weight.
Right.
But I look at it, I'm like, okay, so we know that your current plan is not working.
Not
So
working.
that's the good news.
Yeah.
So we now can actually change your nutrition plan so we can either lose weight or maintain weight, but in this case it'd be lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just checking that box is so powerful for someone trying to lose weight, because oftentimes I feel like they're going into a nutrition plan blind and they're just already changing everything just to change.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get something that I call nutritional confidence.
Right.
You ever get that with your clients?
100%. Yeah, just the tracking alone is so powerful for most people. And for people that you're seeing, I'm thinking too that they're also starting some sort of exercise routine. So it is important to have that 3 weeks worth of data to see how that exercise is also playing a factor in their deficit.
Yeah.
So having that 3 weeks for me too is great with most of the clients that I work with, because most of them have been so turned off by more complex methods, and by just tracking by, a week in, even people are feeling just better about their choices.
Yeah.
So tracking alone can and has been shown to help people make behavior changes because they're just conscious and aware. A lot of people didn't know that they were having a little bit of extra here, a little bit of extra there. But when you're having to take a picture of it or log it and write it down, now all of a sudden it comes to the forefront like, oh, okay, this explains a lot. I think I have been. Yeah, a big one for moms I see is finishing their kids' plates.
Yeah.
When their kids don't finish food, instead of, throwing that food away, there's a guilt there. So it's like, oh, okay, I had 5 extra dino nuggies and some fries. And then later I had a half a slice of pizza here, and I had some leftover cookies that my son didn't finish. So all of those little things. But when you were tracking, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, you're taking a pause. Do I really want to take a picture of these leftover mac and cheese right now?
That is one of my major reasons, possibly why I started to gain a lot of weight as a dad, is because Lucas would eat like 10% of his plate and then I would start to eat that.
Yep.
Right. And it's for a lot of dads and parents out there, they don't even notice that. They might still even be working out. And I was actually working out while we had Lucas, but it wasn't enough because I was eating the same amount. Plus I was eating another 20, 30, 40, 50%
Right.
because Lucas wasn't eating all of his food.
Mm-hmm.
And if you extrapolate this over a course of a year, yeah, it makes sense. As a dad, you're going to gain another 5 pounds, another 10 pounds, another 20 pounds. And only when I started to really shift my understanding of that overeating side of it, I also started to apply more exercises because those were the easy parts that I can control.
Right.
I'm like, I still have that belief of like, no, plus a lot of his foods are healthy, but the other side to me is like, it's like wasting money. I'm like, I'm just going to eat it.
Right.
And then I'm just going to make up for it by doing an extra workout. Right. So, and then once I understood exactly how many workouts I need to do without really altering the change of that, I started to gain confidence that I would just maintain my weight, or I actually started losing the weight.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
And for me, I would just ask myself, am I really hungry right now? And
Yeah.
then if I'm not, just truly honoring my own body's cues
Right.
and saying, I'm not hungry. I just ate a full dinner. I don't need to, I'm not saving anyone. That was, I guess, what a lot of patients tell me is they were told over and over that there was starving children in Africa, and so you need to
Mm-hmm.
finish what's on your plate. And so you're not saving those children by finishing what's on your kid's plate. And most of the time, you're disregarding what your body is telling you, and you're already full.
Yes.
And so that's what I'll usually now be able to stop myself. And I stopped giving Lucas such huge portion sizes
Yeah.
as well. So it's not a bad thing to feel a little bit of guilt and then say, I probably made too much, and we can adjust that too.
Yes. On a side note, if you're a Filipino family and you finish your plate, they're going to get you another one.
100%.
Right. And you're like, what is happening? So, like, a good strategy is to just not finish everything and just leave 20% on the plate. And they're like, oh, he must be full.
Yep.
Right. So, it's just a really interesting culture shift. But I've noticed that more as I start diving into weight loss and nutrition health. So, let's go into the first plan. So first off, guys, like, I've used all three of these plans for all of my clients if they've all been fairly successful in each one, right? So when you're designing a plan and when you're choosing something like this, you want to consider where you are in terms of stress, right? So if you're extremely stressed and you can't take on another thing that's going to make you even more stress, I would gear towards more of the simple way first. And then as you start to reduce your stress, right, through exercise, through meditation, finding your ways to really reduce some of those 4 triggers, then you could possibly get into this more caloric tracking method. So they all work, and there's probably going to be some doctors and nutritionists out there that's like, I can't believe he's doing that. I'm going to tell you guys, it works. It's worked hundreds and hundreds of times. And I'm one of those that's 20% science. I need 20% science, and then I'm 80% experiment. And I might not be the practitioner for you if that's the case. But
Yeah, I actually really appreciate that though, because as a dietitian, the more that I have learned, it's great for me, but I haven't needed to tell more patients that information. I still always have to take something that's very complex and make it actionable and simple so that they'll actually follow through with it.
yeah,
And so your perspective on things is actually really refreshing. And so I think there might be other dietitians or professionals who would say, like, this is just too simple. But the way that we have it set up and the accountability and support that we offer,
yeah,
we see huge changes and people who are excited while they're doing it, which I think is the most important part.
yeah,
They're actually saying, "Oh my gosh, wow, this is really simple and I'm
yeah,
proud of myself," and they're building that confidence.
yeah.
So maybe you could start with what is the first.
The first one,
Yeah.
the first method. It's going to sound crazy, but you just take a look at your plate and then you just remove 20% off that plate. That's really all you got to do for the next 3 weeks. So, one, make sure you're tracking for the first 3 weeks exactly what you're doing, because we don't know what 20% would look like.
Right.
Right. So, what I've had the most simplest, and this has worked hundreds of times, especially in my beginning part of my journey where I didn't know a lot about meal composition just yet, I was like, let's just take out 20%. Let's go see what happens. Right. And they're like, okay, cool. And then they would take out 20%, and lo and behold, they would start to lose a bunch of weight. And what they also found in the process was they're like, I'm not even hungry. Like, I don't even understand why I'm even finishing the plate, just even in general. Even just with this 80%, I feel like I'm still full.
Right.
So, which is really, really ironic a lot of times because they were eating so much at one point. So, really simple way is just to take that plate, reduce it by 20%, and then just eat that for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I find this is really helpful when I'm seeing people who are going out to eat a lot, or their portion sizes when they are tracking and we're reviewing those together. It's very large portion sizes to begin with. So it's not a hard sell for most people to just say, can we cut back on that plate size and see what happens? And you're right that most of the time they're able to finish, especially if you start to implement any sort of mindful eating where you're slowing down and actually allowing for yourself to be full, then, oh my gosh, it's like, oh, wait, that was enough. I didn't need everything that was there. So I actually love that as the most simplistic way to start looking at that plate. And if it's, especially if you're going out to eat a lot, everybody knows portion sizes. You'll go out for breakfast and it'll be an omelet and it'll say it's a 3-egg omelet, but I don't know how many eggs are in there, but that
6.
omelet is the size of your head. That's,
Yeah.
compared, just be thinking, if I was to make this at home, how much would I actually be doing? And you're right, just cutting back on that overall percentage is so helpful.
Yeah. So what's crazy is they'll lose about 5 to 10% of their body weight over a course of time, right? Really, really, really quickly. But here's the other thing. I only have them do that for 3 weeks because I want them to eat again, because it depends, because a lot of my clients are still working out. While deficits work really well for body fat loss and weight loss, it makes it really difficult for them to add muscle. So I'll do this for 3 weeks, but then I'm like, okay, eat full again for a whole week, and then we'll do it again. And we experiment, and then we track it. And there's a couple of benefits to that. One, they're like, oh, cool, I get to like relax. I'm not restraining myself. I get to eat a little bit for a week, and then they go right into it again. So it's very cool when we set it up that way, because they're just not deprived.
Right.
So I really like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into the second one. So the first one was just straight visual.
Right. Just cutting back on overall calories by cutting down on the portion.
Yeah.
And then what is that next? And it's not even more complex. It's just a tiny bit more complex. And so what's that second one?
So the first one was more visual.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be more compositional, right? So we're still taking the plate, but now we need to understand what a carbohydrate is, what a protein is, and what is vegetables, right? And fats, obviously, too, right? So once we identify what's on that plate, then we start to use our hands as a source of measuring. So for protein sources, we typically want a palm, your palm. Don't use someone else's palm. If we're doing vegetables, it's normally a handful of vegetables, right? Whatever you can fit in your hand. And then if you're doing carbohydrates, it's normally about a fist size of carbohydrates. That's one whole meal in a plate.
Yep. And I do mine a little bit different, but
yeah, what's yours? Sorry.
That's okay. So mine is the palm size for protein.
Okay.
And then the cupped hand for carbohydrate. And then ideally two fistfuls of vegetables. But for somebody just starting out, if they're more comfortable with just one.
Right. We mixed our carbs and vegetables.
But remember, you're working with people who are also starting a pretty intense workout routine. Right. And I'm seeing patients who are still in that, maybe just starting to walk 15 minutes 3 times a week. So a lot less activity. Yeah. So, and that's why when looking at anything or following any advice, you want to make sure, obviously, that it's individualized for your goals. And so you're working with people who are starting the gym, starting to weight lift, and that might look a little bit different. And it's all part of the experiment too, to see what works for someone. But I do tend to have a little bit more veggies in there if I can with people.
Yeah. So when they start to do this composition awareness, they start to notice that they don't include a lot of protein. They don't include a lot of vegetables. So just by shifting that composition, oftentimes I get general weight loss right away.
Yeah.
Even though the intention is not to lose weight, my intention is just to make sure to feed this athlete so they can function and train and recover like a normal human being. They still lose weight, right? Yep. So that's really an important critical piece. Like, this is kind of our default, right? So like fist size of carbohydrates or vegetables, and then a handful of carbs or vegetables, and then a palm size of protein times 3.
Yeah.
That's typically where it starts for me. And for those of you that might be a little bit bigger, like you're above 5'6", I'm just kidding. You're above like 6 foot. With the protein sizes might change a little bit for me. You know, I can go up to 4, maybe even 5, especially if they're just a larger athlete,
Mhm.
right? They just require a little bit more nutrition for them to function well. So if you're kind of on the bigger side, right? Like I think you can adjust your protein sizes a little bit more because you're going to need a little bit more, especially if you start to implement exercise. So just that's the first 3 weeks. So look at your plate, identify the composition, and then just do the 3, right? 1, 1, 1. Carb, vegetables, protein.
Right.
And then
I was going to say, I find that when I first meet with someone, yeah, they're usually getting a lot. And we talked about this last week too, is like the Filipino style of like getting 2 fistfuls, maybe 3 fistfuls of carbohydrates.
that's the Filipino portion
It's the
sizes. Yeah.
Filipino way. And so also those first 3 weeks, just noticing where you're at and making those just composition changes.
Yeah.
Not saying that you can't have the rice, but
Mhm.
it's just working on adjusting that portion size. And whether it's, you know, taking, if you're going from 3 down to 1, oh my gosh, that's huge. And increasing the vegetables. Whereas I find that some people, when they've tried to do deficits before, all they do is cut out the rice altogether and their plate becomes like very tiny.
Just like
and
chicken.
They don't add in vegetables, so the volume is missing. So I like the plate method because the volume of the plate is still quite large. But what we're doing is changing the composition of what's creating that fullness of the stomach. So now the vegetables are very dense in nutrients, but very low in energy.
Yes. Yeah, there were days where I look at my old plates and it was just rice and curry.
Yeah.
Right? Like 6 or 7 fist sizes of carbohydrates, and then not even the chicken, I just put the curry sauce on it.
Yes.
So it's just fat and sugar.
Just, yeah.
Right? And I think it seems so simple, but a lot of our weight gain at least in my family was because of that.
Right.
And in the past, they got away with it. So I was born in Philippines because we were just so active. Like we didn't have transportation. We had to use our feet for transportation.
Right.
We didn't have cool tools and machines to do a majority of our labor. We did all of that physical labor. So we took a lot of what we did just initially, and then we go into a country that has literally everything. We can do all of our work in our computer.
Right.
So it changes, our nutritional needs change because of that. So it's shocking for a lot of people when they're like, what? That's what I'm supposed to eat? And then when they start to realize it, it's very empowering for them because right away, especially if you were like me, eating 6 carbs in every single plate, you're going to have massive weight loss changes probably the first week, right? And you might hate the world because you're so used to a lot of the carbohydrates, but over time, you're going to see some pretty quick wins on the scale. So
yeah, I find that people actually, they weren't realizing how heavy and sluggish they would feel from the meal composition. And so when we start to change things around, they actually they feel comfortable full, but they feel a little bit lighter. And maybe they're seeing less GI issues, so less gas, bloating, stomach pain. And so that's a huge win. If you can tell someone, hey, we are going to cut back on the carbohydrates, but the way that you're eating right now, let's focus in on how you're actually feeling afterwards.
Yeah.
And when they see improvements in that, you're going to be more likely to move your body more. Versus if you totally have that heavier carbohydrate fat meal, you're probably going to want to sit down. Like we've all had that meal where we just almost need to just relax from it or have like meat sweats. If anybody, which I've seen you before where you're just like having to sit.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference to start to accumulate those wins along the way
Yeah.
with that change in composition.
Let me know if you have had this experience before, because I'll have females come up to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm eating so much. Am I supposed to eat this much?
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 weeks down the road, they lose weight,
Right.
and it's really cool to really create that experience for them, because they didn't think that they're allowed to eat that much. And when they say that much, I'm like, are you sure you're eating better? But a lot of times in the past, they'd just be eating sugars,
Right.
right? And they seemed like a small portion, but once we start to implement starches and vegetables and protein, visually it looks bigger for them,
Mm-hmm.
but calorically it's a lot less.
Yeah, which I feel like is such a mind challenge for people,
Mm-hmm.
but because that was part of my schooling, as well as looking at different pictures of here's a 300 calorie snack and here's a 300 calorie snack, and they look wildly different because one has fruits and vegetables and it's a whole plate,
Yeah.
versus getting one small muffin and they're the same calorically, but the nutrient density goes up when you all of a sudden have fruits and vegetables and lean proteins in those meals. So you're right. A lot of women are so excited that they're not just trying to shrink.
Right.
It's not about just having the smallest little plate where they're very sad about it. They're actually excited that they can have fruits and vegetables and they can have carbohydrates. It's just the portioning.
Yeah. I had a client just last week. It was like, this is a lot of food.
Mm-hmm.
And really it comes up to the vegetables. They're just not used to eating that volume of vegetables.
Yeah.
And that was a major shift for them. And then like, oh my gosh, I lost so much weight. It's really exciting to really change that behavior, because the size of the food is not always like what it says.
Yeah.
Like a bagel.
Right.
It's like 1 billion calories.
Well, it's not 1 billion, but definitely if
Yeah.
you had a bagel and cream cheese versus doing the plate method version, which would, if you have time to make some sort of omelet that has, my favorite to do is salsa. It's my favorite vegetable. Salsa and spinach, and I'll do that with 2 eggs, and then I'll usually have a high fiber English muffin with that and maybe a little bit of avocado.
Right.
I can have all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very satisfied and very full, and the nutrient density of that meal is a lot higher than just having the bagel with the cream cheese. So, and what we've also done in changing that composition is increase fiber, which is my favorite thing to talk about, because all of a sudden now you're having better bowel movements. Fiber is also wonderful because it actually helps lower cholesterol, it helps control blood sugars, and for most people, they're not getting enough.
Right.
And so that plate method can be really helpful to, that'll be a second thing that people are like, oh my gosh, I'm actually having regular bowel movements. Like I'm not constipated anymore. So dietitians, we talk about poop a lot. It's just, that's what we do.
When
and
you
so
say better bowel movements, the poop is just rounder.
Yeah.
But that's what it's supposed to look like.
Exactly. Yeah. Like a fully formed, I call them like a S-shaped unicorn poo. And so that's what we're ideally going for. But it takes a few weeks for the body to adjust to that much fiber and to have a noticeable difference. And then when people do, they're so excited. So, yeah.
We haven't even gone to the deficit version of plate method yet. But right away, just by changing to that's why I like the plate method, because right away it almost gets them to eat a little bit less. Right. But the way to strategically do a deficit with the plate method is really just swapping things. And what I like to do with my clients is I just swap the carbohydrates with vegetables. Right? It doesn't have to be every single meal. In fact, when I first implement this, I'm only swapping 1 meal out of that 3 to just have all vegetables and protein. And when they do that, they have significant weight loss over the course of 3 weeks, which is really, really cool to see, right? So, and obviously you can make it even more aggressive by you've seen people kind of just no carbs at all, only vegetables and protein. And that's why you have some of these really massive weight loss changes, because a cup of vegetables is very low calorically compared to a cup of rice.
Right.
So, and that's why it's working for a ton of people. How much, do you have an idea how much one cup of vegetables calorically would be?
It depends what it is, but probably 30 to 40
Calories.
calories.
And then like a cup of rice is what, 40 grams of 40 to 50 grams typically. So how much is that calorically? 50 times 4?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. Maybe 150 calories.
Yeah, 150, 200,
Yeah.
depending on the size. So
I'm not one of those people who knows every single calorie and everything, so I
Yeah.
do still have to look things up.
Mhm.
But that's because I don't often use that
Yeah.
with my clients. And so
Yeah.
I do like what you're saying with deficits. I usually am trying to keep people within like a 1 to 2 pound weight loss per week as a
Right.
slow and steady over time, I would
Mhm.
say. I know we vary a little bit on that. I think you see much bigger results sometimes with people, and that's not a bad thing, but I tend to stick to that 1 to 2 pounds, and maybe somebody who's working with me maybe can't handle such big changes to cutting out carbohydrates that low.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, I just wanted to bring that up because a cup of vegetables is 1x compared to 10x, which is like dense carbohydrates, right? So
100%. It makes a big difference in composition.
Yeah.
And now you have a lot of vitamins and minerals that you were missing out on from just eating something like bread or something like rice. There is still definitely vitamins and minerals, but if you have no variability, like what you were saying, is rice is such a staple, you're getting that every meal, so increasing that variety too. And we talked about this in our first episode, is just going for a more colorful plate. You're bringing in a bunch of different phytonutrients that you were missing out on before, which can help with mostly overall inflammation. So
that's beautiful.
Okay, let's talk about the third one.
All right, let's talk about the third one. Now we're going into ninja mode, calorie tracking.
Yeah.
And I hate this method and I like it at the same time. And I say I hate this method because people jump right into calorie tracking. And I hate it because their composition is poor.
Yeah.
Right? It's all sweet potatoes and rice, or it's just all carbs, or it's just all fats. So right away, I while it can work, they can lose weight, the composition doesn't benefit their activity. So that's why I like to start out with just a visual and then into the plate method, because we start to get an idea of what the composition is, and then we can use that composition to build a human being. So there is a school of thought where it's like, if I just eat 500 calories less than what I burn, I'm going to lose weight. However, it's like, that's just weight. And oftentimes, if your composition is not right, the weight that you're losing is muscle, which is tough for me. That's why you see the people that are just kind of skinny fat. And I'm like, oh man, we did this wrong. So we should go back into composition really quick. I love this method because you can be very analytical and you can really start to create a cadence and a rhythm to understanding how much you are actually going to lose every single week. I had a client that came into me and she was like, it's like, I've been eating 2,300 calories every single day for the past 4 weeks, and I haven't seen any weight loss. And I was like, oh, heck yeah. So you know what that means? That means your body is burning 2,300 calories every single day if you legitimately tracked it. And she was like, oh, I didn't know that. Right? So I was like, so here's what you do. You just take that 2,300 and then we reduce it by 500 calories. And what ends up happening over the course of a week is you lose a pound, because 1 pound is 3,500 calories. So just by adjusting that small metric creates this like linear drop really, really quickly. So I feel a lot of times athletes that track and then they don't see the weight loss and they get so depressed about it. I'm like, what are you so depressed? You've tracked concrete evidence of what's allowing you to sustain muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
Now all you got to do is just do this for 3 weeks and you'll lose 3 pounds.
Right.
And let's just experiment. Let's just try it. So I think oftentimes when people track, they think they're tracking to lose weight, but sometimes tracking is just to see what your metabolism is.
Yeah, and to make sure that you are still feeling active enough. I remember we did a nutrition challenge that I was in, and we did some calorie deficits. And I remember that when we did a deficit, and I want to say maybe I was at 1800, and that was a deficit for me, and I was feeling really good. Like all of my meals, I felt satisfied with. I felt very good about, I did not feel in terms of, I wasn't feeling like I was depraved of anything. I was just watching my portion sizes. I was eating a lot more vegetables, doing plate method, and I had energy for the gym. So I had increased going to the gym maybe 5 times a week. Now, we tried another deficit during that same challenge where we went down a little bit further to 1600. And this was actually, I don't want to speak for my best friend Piper, but the two of us did it, and we were so tired that we could not. We just came into the gym and our energy was so low that we were so sad. We could do hardly anything, and we were like, okay, this was not right. So there's nothing wrong with that if you realize, okay, that was way too low.
Yes.
And just saying we need to adjust because one of my priorities is building strength and muscle mass and being able to show up to the gym and feel good that I can actually work out with my friends. And so it was good for me to see that difference and feel when I had gone a little bit too low. So I think, like you said, sometimes it can be really straightforward with people, which is why it's nice.
Right.
We see where they're at. We've been tracking that for a while. We cut that down a little bit and we see a nice steady, weight loss while they're still able to hit PRs in the gym and still have a lot of energy. So I would say I feel the same. I kind of hate and also
love the calorie
calorie. I would say that because I have a specialty area within eating disorders or people who have disordered eating patterns, I mostly see people who are coming to me saying, please don't make me track the calories because I get really caught up in the numbers. So in that case, I can do that for them by them taking the pictures themselves. I'm able to just judge by looking at a plate. I might have to look some things up, but I can basically calculate and see. And then I will give them suggestions from there, but they don't have to be doing it themselves. So I would say that that's important to note for anybody who feels like they're getting really obsessive about the numbers. If somebody maybe has been obsessive about the scale in the past and they're trying to work on their relationship with that and numbers, then this method might be a little bit too strict. So make sure that you have a coach who's supportive and who can help you with those changes.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought up the point of the 1600 calorie and how you felt compared to 1800. This is why I also dislike moments where we're on a deficit because of that strength component. Because here's the thing, guys. The more strength you have, the more muscle you have, the greater your metabolism is going to be. So in moments where my athletes are getting the strongest and getting the most muscular is when we're not on a deficit. So there are phases where I'm like, hey guys, we're going to eat to build muscle. We're going to do this, right? So like the purpose is not to lose, let's maintain, and let's create some recomposition. But also on their end, they want to lose a lot of weight. So I want to encourage that, but I tell them like, hey, we're going to do this for 3 weeks. Keep in mind, there's not a lot of like muscle growth in this area, right? While it can happen, just typically it doesn't. So I've done deficits too. And when I go into a deficit, I also go into an understanding that maybe my strength might not be the best. I'm just trying
Right.
to
You
cut
might
a
not
lot
hit
of
a
body
PR
fat.
that week.
Might not hit a
yeah.
PR that week. So it resets expectations. But at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, when you guys are designing this nutrition plan, you want to get to a point where your basal metabolic rate, or the amount that you're burning, is beyond 2,000, 2,400, 2,600, 2,800. I have some athletes that are probably burning somewhere around 35, 3,600, right? So it's like, how do I get there? Because now you have opportunities where maybe there is a birthday where it doesn't really impact you as much, because metabolically your body needs all that calories to be able to just sustain weight. So, and the way you get there is actually making sure that you're eating enough to support muscle growth, and then your metabolism keeps increasing.
Right.
So, but that's why I like the calorie counting side, because it's super powerful in terms of a practitioner or a trainer to just really adjust things on the fly. And I agree with you. I had a client that does get stressed out tracking, and I'm just like, just send me the pictures and I'll count it for you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, dude, you just got to add another fistful of carbs or another palm size of protein into your meal. And they're like, that's it?
Right. It's very usually easy because we've looked at hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah.
Well, I guess thousands of meals. And so we're able to just easily look at something and make some simple tweaks for someone that they're not able to see themselves.
Yes. Okay, so guys, really quick, I want to make sure I pre-plan. If you decide to do some type of deficit, you will get hungry sometimes. And we're going to do a separate video on how to not overeat in the moments where you are practicing a deficit. I think it's going to be extremely valuable. We'll set that on another link, or click somewhere up here. We'll post it. But listen, if you're trying to lose weight, but you're just frustrated because you just can't seem to see any results, we would love to help you out. Now, we've been helping thousands of our athletes over the course of a decade by crafting personalized programs that are not only sustainable, but also effective. Now, if you're ready to transform your health, click on the show notes below, book a call with one of our coaches. We'd love to help you out. Now back to the show. Peace. All right, so let's review what the 3 were. Okay. And then we're going to give some action plans that they can take immediately that's going to allow them to take one more step closer to this weight loss journey.
Sure.
So let's review. What was the first one?
So the first one was simply to look at the plate and cut that down by 20%. Mm-hmm. The second one was to be looking at the composition and start to change that around to follow plate method portioning. Mm-hmm. And then the third one is actually tracking calories and putting yourself into a deficit that way.
Yeah, a deficit for 500 calories.
Exactly.
Don't go too hardcore.
Yeah, don't go more than that.
So those are the big 3. But again, make sure first, for the first 3 weeks, is to track what you're doing, whether you're visually measuring, composition measuring, or calorically measuring, and then apply those changes. Yeah. So, guys, if I had one action plan that you guys can actually just do today, is to just track whatever you're doing for 3 weeks. And then on the check mark, did I gain weight? Did I maintain weight? Or did I lose weight? Yeah. And then celebrate that. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if you gain weight, celebrate it, because you know what you're doing right now is not working. Or even if you maintain weight, what you're doing right now is supporting just to maintain your body weight.
Yeah, and it's giving you more data and more information about yourself. So anytime we can be more mindful of what we're doing and what our habits are, I think that definitely needs to be celebrated.
Beautiful. So guys, if you like this episode, make sure to subscribe. We are going to shoot a few more things about this to help you guys in your weight loss journey. Love you guys. Keep getting better. Peace.